Commissioner Gordon, Bane has escaped.
When the world is asleep, there, in that quiet chamber, the routines you honor become signals to whatever force governs the trajectory of your life. When you choose structure over impulse, when you choose order over chaos, when you decide to show up even when emotion is absent, you compress intention into action. That action becomes a message written without sound, a silent declaration that you refuse to drift through life hoping something external lifts you. Repetition becomes the architecture of certainty. Devotion shapes direction. Every unfinished chapter inside you begins to close the moment you give your hours to something that sharpens your spirit rather than drains it. Your discipline is your prayer, and every choice that requires sacrifice becomes another line in a vow you make to your future self. Many people try to speak their desires into existence, but words evaporate when they meet a mind that carries no proof. The body listens only to patterns. The spirit responds only to consistency. What you do repeatedly becomes a sacred offering to the vision you are determined to build. When you wake early not because someone told you to, but because you want your intention to outrun your excuses, the universe interprets that posture as readiness. When you resist distraction even once more than your impulses expect, that gesture becomes a form of reverence, not toward something external, but toward the version of you that refuses to stay trapped in cycles that once numbed ambition. Every disciplined act becomes a form of gratitude for the opportunity to evolve. Without saying a word, you communicate exactly what you want from life by proving you are willing to remove what keeps you stagnant. Quiet effort becomes a ceremony of alignment. People search for meaning in loud declarations, yet the deepest form of alignment arrives through repetition that costs you comfort. When you sit down to work while others drift through their day on autopilot, that single choice tells a higher order that you are willing to bleed in silence so you can rise in clarity. Moving with intention when fatigue visits is a message in itself. Holding your standards when pressure builds becomes a reminder that commitment is not supposed to feel easy. It is supposed to feel like tension, pulling you toward the version of you that fear tried to bury. Every disciplined moment becomes a form of connection to something greater than chaos. The more consistent you are, the more fluent you become in the language of progress. There is a moment in every life where the gap between who you are and who you could become feels unbearable. That moment is the hinge point. You will either numb the pressure or respond to it. When you choose the second path, when you decide that the discomfort of growth is better than the comfort of stagnation, your actions begin to speak louder than your fears. The world might not hear it, but something in the fabric of your future does. You attract opportunities not through wishful thinking, but through patterns that prove you are ready to carry them. The quiet hours where you commit to a path no one understands yet become the foundation of the reality you will one day live. Discipline communicates intention with a clarity no spoken plea can match. Effort is not a burden. It is communication. When you train your attention onto something that matters, you reshape neural pathways. You teach your mind what to value. You create architecture around your future instead of letting it collapse under indecision. Each hour spent on something meaningful becomes a form of devotion. The world respects those who respect their purpose. Even the obstacles that rise to test you begin to shift when they realize you will not be moved by convenience or emotion. There is power in routine. There is clarity in commitment. There is transformation in consistency. Life responds differently to someone who refuses to break agreements with themselves. When you choose commitment over impulse repeatedly, your identity begins to change. You stop negotiating with weakness. You stop justifying delay. You stop allowing your old tendencies to whisper excuses into your mind. The more actions you collect, the more undeniable your direction becomes. That is the secret behind people who rise from nothing. They pray through effort. They speak through consistency. They send a message through sacrifice that they will not accept a life built by fear. Every repeated choice becomes a step forward, even on days that feel motionless. Your inner world listens closely to what you do when no one is watching. If you abandon the mission during difficult moments, you teach your subconscious that pressure breaks you. If you push through even slightly, you teach it that pressure activates you. That teaching becomes a new identity. The brain rewires around evidence, not intention. You are not transformed through declarations. You are transformed through the decisions you honor consistently. That is why disciplined people begin to walk differently, think differently, carry themselves differently. They have built an internal structure that no distraction can dismantle. Silence becomes a battlefield where you test your devotion. Noise makes everything feel urgent. Quiet makes everything feel real. When you hold your focus during the hours when temptation to escape is strongest, you carve new territory inside yourself. That territory becomes a sanctuary where intention meets effort. No one can interfere with that space once it is forged. It becomes the engine that powers your resilience. It becomes the anchor that grounds your progress. It becomes the compass that points you toward the version of you that once felt distant. Every person who has ever rebuilt their life started with a single vow, not to others, but to themselves. They committed through action long before the results appeared. They let their habits speak louder than their fears. They built routines that reflected where they were going, not where they began. That is the essence of transformation. You don't become who you want to be by waiting for clarity. You become that person by proving you deserve that identity through repeated action, through consistency when motivation vanishes, through commitment when emotion wavers. Every time you follow through on something you told yourself you would do, you create chemical proof that your intentions matter. Serotonin rises when action aligns with promise. That rise is not just emotion, it is architecture. It stabilizes the inner structure that holds your identity together. People think confidence comes from loud behavior or external praise. Yet in reality, it comes from these quiet internal contracts. When you honor them, the mind relaxes because it knows it can rely on you. When you break them, even in small moments, the foundation cracks. Your inner world remembers every abandoned intention. It stores every unfinished habit. It records every escape disguised as comfort. You are not judged by others before you are judged by yourself. Discipline becomes the way you show your soul that you value your direction more than your impulses. When you treat your choices with respect, you communicate that your future deserves devotion. Your discipline is your prayer because every choice reflects your worth before your life does. There is a shift that happens when you decide your promises are not suggestions but laws. A quiet authority forms inside you. You begin to operate from a place of honor rather than convenience. Keeping a promise to yourself is not about perfection. It is about refusing to betray the version of you trying to rise. Every time you push aside the distraction that tries to claim your attention, you tell your mind that clarity matters. Every time you complete a task you would rather avoid, you signal that you are done letting emotion dictate the trajectory of your life. Biological reward follows. Serotonin doesn't just elevate mood, it elevates identity. It teaches your nervous system that you are capable of execution, not survival. With each kept promise, you craft a narrative where you are someone who follows through. And when that narrative becomes solid, others begin to see it too. Your discipline is your prayer because action becomes the form your honesty takes. The internal damage that comes from breaking your own promise is subtle but corrosive. It doesn't explode, it erodes. You start questioning your ability. You start underestimating your potential. You start interpreting every setback as confirmation that your goals are unrealistic. Not because they are, but because your self-trust is fractured. Breaking your own word trains your nervous system to expect disappointment. Then, even when opportunities appear, the mind hesitates. It doubts your readiness, not the path. Reversing that pattern requires rebuilding trust with yourself one completed action at a time. The healing begins when effort replaces excuse. The identity slowly reforms when you deliver on what you declare. Your discipline is your prayer, because the vows you keep shape the future you inherit. There is a power that comes from treating your habits as sacred. When you decide that your time is not a playground for impulse, your days acquire weight. When you choose consistency instead of chaos, your spirit stands taller. Every completed task becomes a gesture of respect toward the person you are becoming. Others will call it discipline. You will feel it as alignment. Doing what you said you would do expands the space inside your chest. It takes you from self-doubt to self-direction. It silences the voice that once bargained for shortcuts. This is not about rigidity. This is about integrity. When you stop betraying yourself, you stop fearing the work. When you honor your path, you honor your worth. Your discipline is your prayer, because devotion to your direction becomes devotion to your identity. The body responds to every promise kept as if you are securing territory in your own psyche. Clarity grows in that territory. Resilience blooms there. You gain a steadiness that can't be shaken by temporary discomfort. When you trust yourself, pressure becomes fuel. Challenges stop feeling like threats and start feeling like invitations. You begin to interpret setbacks differently. Instead of taking them personally, you translate them as part of the process. Self-trust makes you capable of confronting adversity without collapsing into doubt. Serotonin stabilizes this response, reinforcing the belief that you can handle what life demands of you. Your discipline is your prayer, because each fulfilled promise strengthens the internal fortress that protects your ambition. Every day you make choices that either build or dismantle your future. These decisions rarely look dramatic. They are small acts repeated until they define you. When you choose responsibility over distraction, the inner world shifts. When you choose effort over ease, the mind records a victory. When you choose follow-through over avoidance, identity crystallizes. People often wonder how others rise so quickly, not realizing they rose slowly through thousands of tiny promises kept in private. Repetition makes the extraordinary feel ordinary. Quiet commitment transforms potential into certainty. Nothing loud is needed. Your discipline is your prayer, because the smallest kept promises echo the loudest inside the mind that made them. When you begin to trust your own word, your relationship with time changes. Hours stop slipping away unnoticed. Days stop drifting. Weeks stop vanishing into routines that lead nowhere. You start living with intention instead of reacting to impulse. Self-trust makes your life feel heavier in the best way. You no longer postpone the work that defines you. You step into tasks with presence, because you know they shape your tomorrow. Keeping promises becomes less about achievement and more about alignment with your deepest sense of direction. Your discipline is your prayer, because each action becomes a message to your future that you are ready to receive more than you once believed you could hold. There is an undeniable confidence that forms when you know you will not betray yourself again. It is not arrogance, it is calm. It is certainty without noise. You stop explaining your plans. You stop negotiating your standards. You stop justifying your ambition to people who do not carry it. When your internal word becomes law, external opinion becomes irrelevant. People sense this shift. They sense steadiness. They sense clarity. They sense a person who no longer depends on others for movement. Your discipline is your prayer because the trust you build inside becomes the aura you carry outside. Each kept promise becomes a line of code in the blueprint of your future. You are writing instructions for the person you are becoming. Every time you act, you reinforce the script. Every time you avoid, you delay the rewrite. Discipline becomes the language that directs your evolution. It is the syntax of self-respect. It is the grammar of identity. The world responds differently to someone who honors their inner agreements. Opportunities align. Relationships shift. Paths open. Your discipline is your prayer because the universe responds to the order you create within yourself. Deep focus is the shutting of 1,000 internal doors. When you sink fully into a task, the brain's default system, the one responsible for worry, replay, and hesitation, begins to fade. That system thrives on distraction. It feeds on unfinished thoughts, unresolved emotions, and imaginary scenarios. But when you work with full immersion, that noise loses power. The mind stops wandering because it finally has something meaningful to anchor to. Doubt comes from scattered attention, not lack of potential. The quieter your inner world becomes, the clearer your direction grows. Deep focus becomes a sanctuary, a place where the past cannot interrupt and the future cannot intrude. You finally hear yourself without distortion. Your discipline is your prayer because silence created through focus becomes the doorway to certainty. As the noise drops, something else rises. You begin noticing details that were invisible in your diluted attention. Patterns emerge. Ideas sharpen. Problems unfold themselves into solvable shapes. That clarity is not magic. It is the natural reward of attention unbroken. Most internal chaos comes from trying to think while also escaping thinking. But when you commit to deliberate concentration, the mental fog dissolves. You feel a sense of control that no external praise can teach. It feels like rediscovering a part of yourself that was dormant under layers of distraction. This is why focus builds confidence. It removes the inner static that makes you question your path. Your discipline is your prayer because every undivided moment signals that your purpose deserves the full power of your mind. The mind can only hold so many thoughts before they collide and create friction. When you multitask or scatter your attention across screens and interruptions, you overload your system. That overload becomes self-doubt because the brain interprets confusion as incompetence. Deep focus removes the collision. It aligns your internal processes so they move in one direction instead of 10. In that alignment, fear loses its grip because your mind finally feels coherent. That coherence creates psychological momentum. You go from second guessing to executing. You go from thinking about work to becoming immersed in it. You leave the world of hesitation and enter the world of forward motion. Your discipline is your prayer because choosing focus over noise is choosing self-trust over internal conflict. Doubt does not appear when you are working deeply. It appears when you are halfway in. Half-hearted effort produces full-blown anxiety. It creates the illusion that you are trying while never giving the brain enough engagement to silence its chatter. When you immerse yourself fully, that illusion vanishes. The brain stops questioning your ability because it is too busy applying it. The mind is engineered to fear uncertainty, but deep focus removes uncertainty by giving your awareness a single target. When the target becomes clear, tension fades. You stop thinking about failure and start thinking about execution. That shift turns effort into peace. Your discipline is your prayer because presence becomes the cure for doubt. When you concentrate intensely, the brain shifts into a state where self-referential thoughts shrink. This is why fear and insecurity disappear during your most absorbed moments. You temporarily forget to judge yourself because the task consumes all available cognitive space. That absence of self-judgment is not avoidance. It is liberation. It is the removal of the inner critic that keeps you trapped. The more time you spend in deep focus, the weaker that critic becomes. You stop questioning whether you belong in your goals. You start acting like someone who already does. This is why mastery feels like meditation. The world gets quiet and you become unstoppable. Your discipline is your prayer because focus transforms your inner world into a place of clarity, not chaos. Without the internal noise telling you stories of doubt, you operate from intention instead of fear. The mind becomes less reactive and more deliberate. You stop being pulled by impulses. You start choosing your direction consciously. That shift makes you feel grounded in a way that scrolling, multitasking, or rushing never will. When your internal world is quiet, your external moves become precise. You waste less time. You waste less energy. You waste fewer days drifting. This clarity becomes addictive. You start craving the peace that only deep focus can give. Your discipline is your prayer because consistency and concentration becomes the roadmap to the life you want. The deeper you focus, the more your brain rewires. Neural circuits strengthen in the direction of whatever you repeatedly engage with. If you live in distraction, your brain becomes wired for chaos. If you live in concentration, your brain becomes wired for precision. Focus is not just something you practice, it is something you become. Every moment spent fully present reinforces the identity of someone capable of doing difficult things with intensity. That reinforcement builds self-respect from the inside out. You begin trusting your mind because you've trained it to obey direction instead of impulse. Your discipline is your prayer because the structure you build inside through focus becomes the foundation for every future victory. You enter a state where action flows effortlessly, not because the task is easy, but because your attention is unified. That unity protects you from overthinking, which is the root of doubt. Overthinking happens when your mind has room to wander. Focus removes that room. It compresses your awareness into one beam of energy, and doubt cannot survive inside that beam. This is why people who practice deep focus long enough experience confidence that feels earned rather than imagined. Your discipline is your prayer because the hours spent in silence turn into clarity that echoes long after the work ends. Many people try to eliminate doubt by talking themselves into confidence. The truth is simpler. Doubt dies when you stop feeding it mental space. Deep focus starves it. When your attention is fully engaged, the brain cannot run its usual loops of fear, comparison, or regret. You silence the enemy by giving it no battlefield. Over time, this becomes your natural state. You stop waking up with mental clutter. You stop carrying worries that once drained your energy. The mind becomes a tool again, not a tyrant. Your discipline is your prayer, because choosing focus repeatedly becomes an offering to the life you are building. Intention is the compass that shapes the direction of your life. When you decide with certainty where your effort should go, your mind begins rearranging its priorities around that decision. Energy does not scatter when intention is anchored. It gathers, concentrates, and moves where it is instructed to move. People who feel drained are rarely short on fuel, they are short on clarity. When you act with decisiveness, the brain preserves energy instead of leaking it through hesitation. Every focused action becomes a signal to your internal world that your path deserves commitment, not excuses.